In a world where success is measured in billions, sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truths. When a powerful CEO's perfectly ordered life collides with two orphaned sisters fighting for survival, both worlds are forever changed. This is a story about what it truly means to be wealthy, what it costs to be a father, and how love can transform even the most hardened hearts. Please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything to us. The steak knife gleamed under the crystal chandelier as Marcus Blackwell cut through his perfectly prepared Wagyu, each slice precise and methodical, just like everything else in his meticulously controlled life. The Le Bernardin dining room hummed with the quiet conversations of Manhattan's elite, but Marcus sat alone at table 12, the same table he'd reserved every Thursday for the past 3 years. His phone buzzed with congratulations. The Yamamoto acquisition was complete, adding another $2 billion to Blackwell Technologies' portfolio. At 42, Marcus had built an empire on predictability. Same restaurant, same meal, same calculated risks that always paid off. His charcoal Armani suit was pressed to perfection. His silver watch caught the light with each movement, and his expression remained as unreadable as the financial reports that had made him one of the youngest tech moguls in America. Success, he'd learned long ago, required emotional distance. The interruption came as he savored his final bite of dessert. A small hand appeared at the edge of his vision, followed by a voice so quiet he almost missed it. "Excuse me, sir. Could I have what you're not eating?" Marcus looked up to find a girl of perhaps 8 years old, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days. Her clothes were clean but worn, and her shoes had small holes near the toes. What struck him most were her eyes, brown and alert, holding a maturity that seemed far too old for her face. "I'm sorry, what?" Marcus set down his fork, genuinely confused. In his world, children didn't approach strangers in 5-star restaurants. "Your bread, and that," she pointed to his barely touched side of roasted vegetables. "If you're not going to eat it." The maitre d' appeared instantly, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Sir, I am so sorry. I don't know how she got in here. Security will." "It's fine." Marcus held up a hand, studying the girl. Something about her reminded him of someone, though he couldn't place who. "What's your name?" "Emma." She stood straighter, as if preparing for a challenge. "I can pay. I have $3. Marcus almost smiled. $3 wouldn't cover the tax on his wine. "Keep your money, Emma." He gestured to his plate. "Take whatever you want." But instead of eating, Emma carefully wrapped the bread and vegetables in napkins, handling each piece like it was precious. Her movements were quick and efficient, practiced. This wasn't her first time. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the small bundle to her chest. As she turned to leave, something inexplicable stirred in Marcus's chest. Maybe it was the way she held herself with such dignity despite clearly being desperate. Maybe it was how she said thank you, like she meant it, not like the empty pleasantries he heard all day. Or maybe it was simply that in his perfectly predictable world, Emma was completely unexpected. "Wait," the word left his mouth before he'd consciously decided to speak. "Where are you going with that food?" Emma paused, her small shoulders tensing. "Home." "And where's home?" For a moment, fear flickered across her face, quickly replaced by defiance. "Somewhere safe." Marcus watched her hurry toward the exit, weaving between tables with the agility of someone who'd learned to navigate adult spaces. Every instinct told him to return to his perfectly planned evening, to his waiting car and his empty penthouse. But something else, something he hadn't felt in years, compelled him to follow. The October air hit his face as he stepped onto the sidewalk, his breath visible in small puffs. Emma was already half a block away, moving quickly but not running. Marcus followed at a distance, his expensive shoes clicking against the pavement as they left the bright lights of the restaurant district behind. Through increasingly narrow streets they went, past storefronts with barred windows and apartments with laundry hanging from fire escapes. This wasn't Marcus's New York. This was the city that existed in the shadows of his gleaming towers. Emma moved with purpose, taking turns without hesitation until she disappeared into an alley between two crumbling brick buildings. Marcus hesitated at the alley's entrance. His rational mind screamed warnings. This was dangerous, foolish, none of his business. But his feet carried him forward into the darkness. The sight that greeted him stopped him cold. Emma knelt beside a makeshift shelter constructed from cardboard boxes and plastic tarps. Inside, barely visible in the dim light from a nearby street lamp, lay another child, younger, smaller, her face flushed with fever. Emma was already unwrapping the food, breaking the bread into tiny pieces. "Lily, I got us dinner," she whispered, her voice gentle in a way that made Marcus's chest tighten. "Real dinner from a fancy place." The younger girl, Lily, stirred weakly. "Emma, I'm hot." "I know, baby. Here, try to eat something." Emma helped her sister sit up, supporting her weight with arms that seemed too thin for the task. Marcus stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Two children, alone in an alley, one clearly seriously ill. The contrast with his own warm, food-filled evening felt obscene. "Hey!" Emma's voice cracked like a whip as she noticed him. She moved protectively in front of her sister, clutching a piece of broken glass she'd grabbed from somewhere. "Stay back. I'm not going to hurt you." Marcus raised his hands, showing he was empty-handed. "Your sister, she needs help. We don't need anything from you." But even as Emma spoke, Lily began to cough, a harsh sound that seemed to come from deep in her chest. Marcus pulled out his phone. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No." Emma's voice was desperate now. "They'll take us away. They'll separate us." "Emma," Lily whispered, and even from several feet away, Marcus could hear the wheeze in her breathing. "I don't feel good." The fear in that small voice broke something open in Marcus's chest, something he'd kept carefully locked away for years. Without conscious thought, he was moving forward, kneeling beside the makeshift shelter. "What's your last name, Emma?" She stared at him, tears starting to fall. "Chen." Emma and Lily Chen. The world seemed to tilt. Chen. Sarah Chen. The name hit him like a physical blow, dragging him back to a rainy night 5 years ago. Twisted metal, the smell of gasoline, and a gentle voice saying, "Stay with me. You're going to be okay." "Your mother?" Marcus whispered, his voice hoarse. "Was her name Sarah?" Emma's eyes widened. "How do you know that?" She died last month." Marcus closed his eyes, remembering warm brown eyes so similar to Emma's, skilled hands that had kept him conscious until the paramedics arrived, a voice that had pulled him back from the edge when his car had hit black ice on the FDR drive. Sarah Chen, emergency room nurse at Mount Sinai, who had been driving home from her shift when she'd stopped to help a stranger. "She saved my life," he said quietly, opening his eyes to meet Emma's startled gaze. "Your mother saved my life." As sirens wailed in the distance, he'd called 911 despite Emma's protests. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. These weren't just two children in need. They were the daughters of the woman who had given him a second chance at life. And now, perhaps, they were his chance to finally do something meaningful with that life. Emma watched him with wary hope as the ambulance lights painted the alley walls red and blue. "Are you really going to help us?" Marcus looked at Lily, unconscious now in her sister's arms, and felt something shift permanently in his chest. For the first time in years, his perfectly controlled world was about to become beautifully, terrifyingly unpredictable. "Yes," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "I'm going to help you." The fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai's emergency room cast everything in harsh white, making the dark circles under Emma's eyes look like bruises. She sat rigidly in the plastic chair beside Lily's bed, her small hand clutching her sister's even smaller one. For the past 4 hours, she hadn't moved except to let the doctors examine Lily. And even then, she'd watched every procedure with the intensity of a guardian angel. Marcus stood by the window, his reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. He'd called his lawyer, his assistant, and half the hospital board, pulling strings with the efficiency that had built his empire. But watching Emma refuse to eat the sandwich he'd bought her, seeing how she flinched every time someone in scrubs approached, he felt more helpless than he had in 20 years. "Pneumonia," Dr. Patricia Williams announced as she entered, her voice professionally gentle. "Bacterial, but treatable. She'll need to stay for observation, probably 3 to 4 days." Emma's shoulders sagged with relief so profound that Marcus felt it in his own chest. "She's going to be okay. She's going to be fine." Dr. Williams smiled, then her expression grew serious. "But I need to ask some questions. Where are your parents?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Emma's face shuttered closed, and Marcus watched her transform back into the wary street kid who'd threatened him with broken glass. "Our mom died," Emma said carefully. "Dad's not around." "Honey, I need to call Child Protective Services. It's protocol when I'll take responsibility for them." The words came out of Marcus before he'd fully formed the thought. Dr. Williams turned to him with raised eyebrows, taking in his expensive suit and the aura of authority that money couldn't buy but power could. "And you are?" "Marcus Blackwell. I knew their mother." He moved closer to Emma's chair, noting how she tensed but didn't pull away. "I'd like to serve as their temporary guardian." Within an hour, Marcus's lawyer had arrived with a stack of papers, and his assistant had somehow expedited background checks that usually took weeks. Money, Marcus reflected, really could move mountains, or at least bureaucracy. But it was Margaret Thornfield, the CPS caseworker who arrived at midnight, who proved unmovable. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, her graying hair pulled back severely and her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I've read your file. Impressive net worth, no criminal record, character references from senators." She paused, looking from him to Emma, who was pretending to sleep but listening to every word. "But what I don't see is any experience with children, any long-term relationships, or any reason to believe you're equipped to care for two traumatized little girls. I can provide money." Margaret's smile was cold. "Mr. Blackwell, I've seen wealthy men decide they want to play daddy before. Usually lasts about 6 weeks, until they realize children aren't acquisitions that can be managed by assistants." Marcus felt his temper flare, the same controlled anger that had steamrolled through countless boardroom negotiations. But before he could respond, a small voice cut through the tension. He stayed. Emma was sitting up now, looking directly at Margaret. All night. He didn't have to, but he stayed. Something in her voice made Marcus's throat tight. Such a simple observation, but Emma said it like it meant everything. 3 days later, Marcus stood in his penthouse apartment, watching Emma explore rooms larger than most people's entire homes. His housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, had stocked the kitchen with child-friendly foods and had somehow procured 2 beds, clothing, and toys with remarkable efficiency. But Emma moved through the space like she was visiting a museum, afraid to touch anything. "This is your room," Marcus said, opening the door to what had been his home office. The mahogany desk and leather chairs were gone, replaced with twin beds covered in bright quilts, a bookshelf filled with children's books, and toys that looked expensive and untouched. Emma stood in the doorway, her overnight bag clutched against her chest. "Where will you work?" The question surprised him. Most 8-year-olds wouldn't think about displaced workspaces. "I have an office downtown, but you worked here at night. I could see the light under the door when I went to the bathroom." Marcus stared at her. She'd been in his home for exactly 18 hours, and she'd already mapped his routines. "How did you know I worked at night?" "The same way I know you don't really sleep." Emma's eyes were too knowing. People who don't sleep walk differently. Mama was like that after double shifts. The casual mention of her mother hit Marcus unexpectedly. Sarah Chen, who had stayed with him through the longest night of his life, making jokes about hospital coffee while keeping him conscious until surgery. How many nights had she come home to these 2 girls, exhausted but still finding energy to be their whole world? That first week was a disaster choreographed by good intentions. Marcus had never prepared breakfast for anyone, let alone 2 children with specific preferences. Emma rejected the chef-prepared meals his assistant ordered, preferring to make peanut butter sandwiches for herself and Lily. She slept on the floor beside Lily's bed every night, despite the matching bed 3 feet away. When Marcus tried to hire a nanny, Emma's response was ice-cold silence that lasted 2 days. But there were moments. The first came on Thursday night, when Lily woke screaming from a nightmare. Marcus heard the crying from his bedroom and found Emma sitting helplessly as her sister sobbed about monsters and darkness. Without thinking, Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and began humming a melody his own mother had sung to him 30 years ago, before cancer had taken her and left him alone with a father who measured love in profit margins. Lily's crying gradually subsided, her small body relaxing as the familiar tune washed over her. Emma watched with wide eyes as Marcus continued humming, one hand gently stroking Lily's hair. "How did you know that song?" Emma whispered when Lily finally fell back asleep. "My mother used to sing it to me," Marcus admitted, surprised by how raw his voice sounded. "A long time ago. Do you miss her?" The question was so simple, so direct that it cut straight through all of Marcus's carefully constructed defenses. "Every day." Emma nodded solemnly. "Mama used to hum when she was scared. She thought we couldn't tell, but we always knew." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Lily sleep peacefully for the first time since arriving. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of muscles he hadn't realized were tight. "Mr. Marcus?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you for staying with us." Marcus looked down at this serious little girl who'd somehow become his responsibility, his purpose, his whole world in the span of a week. She was still wary, still testing boundaries, still ready to run if he proved unworthy of her trust. But for the first time, she was looking at him like he might actually be worth the risk. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me." Outside, Manhattan glittered with its usual indifference. But inside this room, something precious and fragile was beginning to grow. Marcus didn't know how to be a father, didn't know if he was capable of the kind of love these girls deserved. but watching Emma's hand slip trustingly into his as they walked back to their room, he knew he was going to try with everything he had. Chapter 3. The conference room at Blackwell Technologies buzzed with anticipation as Marcus reviewed the final presentation slides for the Yamamoto Industries merger. 6 months of negotiations had led to this moment, a deal that would expand his company's reach into Asian markets and cement his position as a global tech leader. Across the table, the Japanese executives sat with polite expressions, their translator whispering quietly between them. "The synergies are clear," Marcus explained, gesturing to the projected financial models. "Combined, our companies will dominate the semiconductor space for the next decade." His phone vibrated. Emma's school. Marcus glanced at the caller ID and hesitated. In the 3 weeks since the girls had moved in, he'd established a rule: no interruptions during crucial meetings. Emma understood this. She was remarkably mature about his work schedule. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. "Excuse me for one moment," Marcus said, stepping away from the table. "This is Marcus Blackwell." "Mr. Blackwell, this is Principal Martinez at Riverside Elementary. Emma got into a fight today. We need you to come in immediately." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Emma, who barely spoke above a whisper at home, who apologized for taking up space, had gotten into a fight. "Is she hurt?" "She's fine, but the other child needed the nurse." "Mr. Blackwell." Emma was defending her sister from some bullying, but her response was concerning. "We need to discuss this in person." Marcus looked back at the conference room where $50 million in contracts waited for his signature. The Japanese executives were already checking their watches. If he left now, the deal might collapse. These men had flown 8,000 miles for this meeting. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he heard himself say. The drive to Riverside Elementary felt endless, despite taking only 12 minutes. Marcus had called his assistant to reschedule the meeting, absorbing the disappointment in Mr. Yamamoto's voice through the translator. James Blackwell, his cousin and VP, had looked murderous when Marcus announced he was leaving. He found Emma sitting outside the principal's office, her school uniform wrinkled and her knuckles scraped. A larger boy sat across from her, holding an ice pack to his nose, his mother speaking in rapid, angry whispers to the secretary. "Emma." Marcus knelt beside her chair. "What happened?" She looked up at him with eyes that held too much pain for an 8-year-old. "Tommy Morrison said Lily was retarded because she talks funny. He said kids like her should be in special schools so normal kids don't have to look at them." Marcus felt rage bloom hot in his chest. Lily had a slight speech impediment, a lingering effect of the pneumonia and years of inconsistent medical care. She was working with a therapist, making remarkable progress, but she was self-conscious about it. "So you hit him?" "I told him to stop first, 3 times. Emma's chin lifted defiantly. "But he kept saying it and other kids started laughing. So I made him stop." Principal Martinez emerged from her office, gesturing for Marcus to join her. The next 20 minutes were a blur of school policies and concerned discussions about Emma's adjustment issues. The other parent demanded Emma be expelled. Marcus listened with half his attention while watching Emma through the glass wall, small and alone in the too big chair. "She's been through trauma," Principal Martinez said gently. "But Mr. Blackwell, this level of protective aggression isn't healthy. Emma needs counseling, structure, consequences for her actions." Marcus nodded appropriately, signed the necessary forms agreeing to therapy sessions, and walked Emma to his car in silence. It wasn't until they were driving home that she spoke. "Are you going to send us away?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "What? No. Emma, why would you think that?" "Because I embarrassed you. Because I made you leave your important meeting." Her voice was barely audible. "Margaret said rich people don't like problems they can't fix with money." Marcus pulled over, his hands shaking slightly as he turned off the engine. In the back seat, Emma stared straight ahead, her small body rigid with expectation of rejection. "Emma, look at me." She turned reluctantly, tears threatening to spill. "I'm proud of you." Her eyes widened in shock. "You protected your sister. You stood up for someone who couldn't defend herself. Yes, hitting isn't the answer, and we'll talk about better ways to handle bullies. But Emma," he reached back to touch her hand. "I would have done the same thing." The tears came then, silent streams down her cheeks. "Really? Really? And Emma? Nothing, no meeting, no deal, no amount of money is more important than you and Lily. Nothing." That evening, Marcus tried to work from home while Emma helped Lily with homework at the kitchen island. His laptop screen showed 17 missed calls from his assistant and 43 unread emails about the collapsed Yamamoto deal. The board would have questions. James would have opinions. His stock price would probably drop. But watching Emma patiently sound out words with Lily, seeing how she celebrated each small victory with genuine joy, Marcus found he couldn't summon much concern for corporate consequences. "Mr. Marcus?" Lily appeared beside his chair, holding a piece of paper covered in crayon drawings. "I made you this." The drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house. One tall figure in a dark suit, 2 smaller ones with pigtails. Above them, in careful kindergarten handwriting, were the words, "My family." "It's beautiful, Lily. Thank you. Emma says you gave up something important to come help her today." Marcus glanced at Emma, who was pretending to focus on her math homework. Sometimes the most important things aren't the ones that seem important. "What does that mean?" Marcus thought about how to explain it to a 5-year-old. "It means taking care of people you love matters more than anything else." Lily nodded sagely. "Like how Emma takes care of me." "Exactly like that." Later, after both girls were asleep, Marcus stood in his home office, now a makeshift workspace squeezed into his bedroom, reviewing the financial reports that detailed exactly how much today had cost him. The Yamamoto deal was salvageable, but his absence had weakened his negotiating position. He'd probably lose 10 to 15 million in revised terms. His phone rang. "James, you cost us the Asian expansion," his cousin said without preamble. "The deal isn't dead. It might as well be." "Marcus, the board is asking questions. Your priorities have become questionable." Marcus looked toward the girls' room, where a soft nightlight glowed beneath the door. He thought about Emma's fierce protection of her sister, about Lily's drawing now magneted to his refrigerator, about the way they'd both said goodnight like they meant it. "My priorities have become clear," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe for the first time in my life. Those girls aren't your responsibility." "Yes," Marcus said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "They are." After hanging up, he walked to the girls' room and cracked the door open. Emma and Lily shared the same bed now. He'd stopped trying to enforce separate sleeping arrangements. In the dim light, he could see Emma's arm wrapped protectively around her sister, even in sleep. Tomorrow he'd face the board's questions and James's disapproval. He'd rebuild the Yamamoto deal and prove that a man could be both a successful businessman and a dedicated father. But tonight, watching 2 little girls sleep peacefully under his protection, Marcus Blackwell felt richer than he ever had before. The boardroom at Blackwell Technologies felt like a courtroom as Marcus faced 12 stern faces around the polished mahogany table. James sat at the opposite end, his expression carefully neutral, but Marcus could read the satisfaction in his cousin's eyes. This moment had been building for weeks. "The Yamamoto deal," board member Patricia Hendricks began, her voice crisp with disapproval, "has been renegotiated at a 20% loss in projected revenue. The Singapore expansion has been delayed indefinitely, and yesterday you missed the Techstars presentation entirely." "I explained that Lily had a medical emergency," Marcus said evenly, remembering the frantic call from Emma's school about Lily's asthma attack. Her inhaler had run out, and your assistant could have handled a pharmacy run. James interrupted smoothly. "Marcus, we understand you're going through a personal situation, but the company requires focused leadership." Marcus felt the familiar surge of anger, but also something new, a protective instinct that had nothing to do with corporate warfare. "Those girls aren't a personal situation. They're my family. Family you've known for 6 weeks, Patricia said. "Marcus, you're one of the most brilliant CEOs in the industry, but this guardian arrangement is clearly affecting your judgment." The word arrangement hit like a slap. Marcus looked around the table at faces he'd known for years, people who'd celebrated his successes and trusted his vision. Now they were looking at him like he'd lost his mind. "I'm calling for a vote of no confidence," James announced, placing a formal document on the table. "Nothing personal, cousin, but the board needs to consider the company's future." Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Lily crying. Says you left because we're too much trouble. When are you coming home?" The words hit him harder than any corporate betrayal. He could picture Emma trying to comfort Lily, both girls wondering if they'd driven away another adult who'd promised to stay. How many times had their father made similar promises before disappearing? "I need 24 hours, Marcus said, standing abruptly, "to consider my response." "Marcus," Patricia began. 24 hours. His voice carried the authority that had built an empire, but his heart was already racing toward home. He found them in the kitchen, Lily curled in Emma's lap while Emma read from a picture book. Both girls looked up when he entered, hope and fear warring in their expressions. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling beside their chair. "I'm home. Are you going to send us back to Margaret?" Lily whispered, her small hand clutching Emma's shirt. "Never." The word came out fiercer than he'd intended. "Lily, Emma, look at me. Whatever happens with my work, we're a family now. That doesn't change." But even as he said it, Marcus felt the weight of an impossible choice. Without his position at Blackwell Technologies, he'd lose the resources to fight for custody, to provide for the girl's future. With it, he'd be trapped in a system that demanded he choose between boardroom and bedtime stories. Later that evening, after the girls were asleep, Marcus found himself in his study reviewing legal documents Margaret Thornfield had delivered that afternoon. Robert Chen, the girl's biological father, had completed a rehabilitation program and was petitioning for custody. "The court will favor biological family," Margaret had explained with professional sympathy. "Your instability at work isn't helping your case." Marcus stared at Robert Chen's photograph, a thin man with Emma's eyes and Lily's stubborn chin, clean-shaven and hopeful-looking in his rehabilitation program graduation photo. According to the file, he'd been sober for 60 days and was living in a studio apartment in Queens, working as a mechanic. "He's their father," Margaret had said, "and he wants them back." Marcus tried to imagine handing Emma and Lily over to this stranger who shared their DNA but none of their recent history. Would Robert Chen know that Lily needed her inhaler within arm's reach at night, that Emma checked the locks on every door before bed, that both girls still sometimes called out for their mother in their sleep? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Emma stood in the doorway in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. "I had a bad dream," she said, but Marcus could tell it was an excuse. She'd heard voices, seen the legal papers spread across his desk. "Come here." He pulled her into his lap, the same way he'd done every night for the past month when nightmares struck. "Want to talk about it? In my dream you were gone. Like Mama, like Daddy." Emma's voice was small against his chest. "Everyone always leaves." "I'm not leaving, Emma. You're in trouble because of us." At work, it wasn't a question. Emma had always been too perceptive. "They want you to choose." Marcus felt something break open in his chest, a wall he'd built years ago crumbling under the weight of a little girl's trust. "Emma, look at me." She tilted her head up, brown eyes reflecting the desk lamp's glow. "When I was your age, my mom got sick, really sick, and my dad, he chose work over being with her. He said he had to provide for our family, but what he really chose was running away from hurt." Marcus's voice grew rough. "I promised myself I'd never be like him, but somewhere along the way, I forgot that promise. So what are you going to choose?" The question hung between them, simple and devastating. Marcus thought about the board meeting, about James's satisfaction, about 20 years of building something that had seemed so important yesterday. "I'm choosing you," he said quietly. "I'm choosing you and Lily, every single time." Emma's arms wrapped around his neck, fierce and trusting. "Even if it means losing your company. Emma, I built that company to feel important, to prove something to people who don't matter. But you and Lily, you're the first thing in my life that's actually important." The next morning, Marcus called an emergency board meeting. He walked into that same boardroom wearing jeans and a pullover sweater instead of his usual suit, carrying a resignation letter in his pocket. "Before you vote," he said, placing his hands flat on the table, "I want to make something clear. 6 weeks ago, I thought success meant market share and quarterly earnings. I measured my worth in stock prices and business magazine covers." He looked directly at James. "I was wrong." "Marcus," Patricia said carefully, "we're all impressed by your charitable impulses. But they're not charity cases." The steel in Marcus's voice made everyone sit up straighter. "They're my daughters, and I'm resigning as CEO to make sure they never doubt that they come first." The room erupted in surprised voices, but Marcus was already walking toward the door. He had more important things to do, like picking up Lily from school and helping Emma with her science project. Behind him, he heard James calling his name, heard Patricia shouting about shareholder value and fiduciary responsibility. But for the first time in his adult life, Marcus Blackwell was walking toward something more valuable than money or power. He was walking toward home. The family court waiting room smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Marcus sat between Emma and Lily on hard plastic chairs, watching other families navigate their own crises while they waited for Judge Patricia Williams to decide their fate. Emma held Lily's hand with white knuckles, and Lily clutched a drawing she'd made of their new life. 3 stick figures in front of a house with an oversized garden. "Remember what we talked about?" Marcus murmured to both girls. "Just tell the truth about how you feel, what you want." Across the room, Robert Chen sat with his court-appointed lawyer, clean-shaven and nervous, in an ill-fitting suit. He kept glancing at his daughters with a mixture of longing and uncertainty that made Marcus's chest tight. This wasn't a villain in an expensive suit. This was a broken man trying to rebuild his life, wanting his children back. Margaret Thornfield approached with a folder thick with evaluations and reports. "Mr. Blackwell, I need to be honest. Your resignation from Blackwell Technologies has raised questions about your financial stability. Mr. Chen has completed his rehabilitation program and has steady employment. And I have 2 girls who've been sleeping through the night for the first time in their lives," Marcus replied quietly, "who trust me to be there when they wake up. The court considers biological relationships. The court should consider what's best for Emma and Lily." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I've never seen such dramatic positive change in children. But Mr. Blackwell, the system has rules." When their case was called, Marcus felt Emma's small hand slip into his as they walked into the courtroom. Judge Williams, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and steel-gray hair, reviewed the files spread before her with careful attention. "Mr. Chen," she began, "you've completed a 90-day rehabilitation program and have been sober for 4 months. That's commendable." Robert Chen stood shakily. "Thank you, Your Honor. I know I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I love my daughters, and I want to make it right." "Mr. Blackwell," Judge Williams continued, "you've resigned from a lucrative position to care for these children, despite having no legal obligation to do so. That's also commendable, though financially concerning." Marcus rose. "Your Honor, I'd like to address the financial concerns." "Proceed." "I've established a consulting firm, Blackwell Solutions, with 3 major clients already secured. My former company, under new leadership, has retained my services for their Asian expansion. I'll earn less than before, but more than enough to provide for Emma and Lily's needs." Marcus paused, looking at the girls. "More importantly, I'll be present for their childhood in a way that being CEO never allowed." Judge Williams made notes, then looked directly at Emma and Lily. "Girls, I'd like to speak with you in my chambers. Alone." The 15 minutes they were gone felt like hours. Marcus watched Robert Chen pace near the windows, his hands shaking slightly, not from withdrawal, but from nerves. When the girls returned, Emma's face was composed, but Lily had been crying. "Based on my conversations with Emma and Lily," Judge Williams announced, "and considering all the evidence presented, I'm awarding permanent custody to Marcus Blackwell." The words hit Marcus like a physical force. Emma's face crumpled with relief, and Lily launched herself into his arms. Across the room, Robert Chen's shoulders sagged with defeat, but Judge Williams wasn't finished. "However, I'm also ordering supervised visitation with Mr. Chen, beginning immediately. These girls have lost too much already. They don't need to lose their father entirely." Marcus felt Emma tense beside him, but when he looked at her questioningly, she nodded slowly. "He's still our dad," she whispered, "even if he wasn't very good at it." 3 months later, Marcus stood in the kitchen of their new house in Westchester, a modest 4-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch and room for the garden Lily had dreamed about. The morning sun streamed through windows that actually opened, unlike his sterile penthouse, and the coffee maker gurgled companionably as he packed school lunches. "Dad, I can't find my math homework," Emma called from upstairs. "Dad," the word still sent a jolt of wonder through him every time. "Check your backpack's front pocket," he called back. "You always put it there when you're worried about losing it." Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, homework in hand, and a sheepish grin on her face. At 9 years old, she'd grown 2 inches and gained 10 pounds of healthy weight. More importantly, she'd started laughing, really laughing at silly jokes and cartoon movies. "How did you know where it was?" "Because I know you." Marcus handed her the lunch bag with her name written in Lily's careful kindergarten handwriting. "You organize things when you're anxious. Like you." Marcus smiled. "Like me." Lily bounded down the stairs, her inhaler properly clipped to her backpack, her speech noticeably clearer after months of therapy. "Dad, can we plant the tomatoes today after school?" "Absolutely. But first, let's survive another day of first grade." The drive to Riverside Elementary, Emma's choice to stay at her original school, had become one of Marcus's favorite parts of the day. Emma helped Lily with her reading in the back seat while Marcus listened to their chatter about upcoming science fairs and playground politics. "Dad?" Emma's voice grew serious as they pulled into the school parking lot. "Are you happy? Like really happy?" Marcus turned to study her face, seeing echoes of Sarah Chen in her thoughtful expression. "Why do you ask?" "Because sometimes I see you looking at your old office building when we drive past, and I wondered if you miss it." Marcus thought about the question seriously, the way Emma's questions always deserved. Did he miss the rush of closing major deals? The satisfaction of building something from nothing? The respect that came with power? "You know what I miss?" he said finally. "I miss feeling important." Emma's face fell slightly. "But then I realized something," Marcus continued, reaching back to touch her hand. I never felt as important as I do when you ask me to help with homework, or when Lily shows me her drawings, or when you both trust me enough to tell me about your bad days. So you don't want your old job back? Emma, I had my old job for 20 years, and I was lonely every single day. I've been your dad for 6 months, and I've never been happier. That evening, as had become their tradition, the family worked together in their garden. Marcus and Emma planted tomato seedlings while Lily drew elaborate plans for where the sunflowers would go. Robert Chen was coming for his weekly visit later, a routine that had evolved from awkward supervision to genuine attempts at rebuilding relationships. "Mr. Marcus," Lily said, kneeling in the dirt beside him, "do you think Mama would like our garden?" Marcus paused, a seedling halfway to the ground. The girls still talked about their mother regularly, and he'd learned to welcome these conversations instead of fearing them. "I think your mama would love that we're growing things together," he said carefully. "She'd probably want to plant some of those purple flowers she loved. What were they called?" "Lavender," Emma said softly. "She used to put it in our bathwater when we couldn't sleep. Then we should definitely plant some lavender." As the sun set behind their modest house, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Marcus watched his daughters chase fireflies across the lawn. Emma's laughter carried on the evening breeze while Lily tried to catch the dancing lights in her small hands. His phone buzzed with a text from James. "Board meeting next week. We need your input on the Chen Industries merger. Are you interested in consulting fees that would make your old salary look modest?" Marcus typed back, "Can we schedule it for after 3 p.m.? I have a school play to attend." "Seriously?" "Seriously. Lily's playing a sunflower and Emma's doing the lights. Wouldn't miss it for all the mergers in Manhattan." A few minutes later, James replied, "You know what, cousin? I'm starting to think you figured out something the rest of us missed." As Marcus tucked both girls into their beds that night, Emma in her own room now, comfortable enough to sleep alone but close enough to hear Lily if she needed her, he reflected on how completely his definition of success had changed. "Dad?" Lily's sleepy voice called from her pillow. "Will you sing the humming song?" "Of course, sweetheart," as he hummed the melody his mother had sung to him decades ago, now sung to daughters who'd chosen him as surely as he'd chosen them. Marcus Blackwell understood what Sarah Chen had tried to tell him that night in the hospital. Sometimes the most important things in life can't be measured in dollars or market share. They're measured in trust freely given, in laughter shared over breakfast, in small hands that reach for yours in the dark. They're measured in the quiet moments when 2 little girls call you dad and mean it with their whole hearts. Outside their window, the garden they'd planted together stretched toward tomorrow, full of promise and new growth. And inside their home, a family that had been broken and lost had found its way to something beautiful, something real, something that would last far longer than any corporate empire. Marcus closed the door softly and smiled. He'd finally learned what it meant to be truly wealthy.